Chapter 18. Visiting Hours. "You can't stay with Granny tonight," said Dad. It was 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and Ben had just got home from school. It was strange that Dad was home so early. He usually didn't finish his shift in the supermarket until 8. "Why not?" asked Ben, noticing his dad's face was dark with worry. "I'm afraid I've got some bad news, son." "What?" demanded Ben, his face darkening with worry too. "Granny's in hospital." A little while later, once they'd finally found a parking space, Ben and his parents went through the automatic doors of the hospital. Ben wondered if Mum and Dad were ever going to find Granny in here. The hospital was impossibly tall and wide, a great monument to illness. There were lifts that took you to other lifts, mile-long corridors, signs everywhere that Ben couldn't comprehend. Coronary care unit, radiology, obstetrics, clinical decision unit, MRI scanning room. Confused-looking patients on trolleys or in wheelchairs were being wheeled up and down by porters as doctors and nurses who looked like they hadn't been to bed for days hurried past them. When we finally found the wing Granny was in, right up on the 19th floor, Ben didn't recognise her at first. Her hair was flat on her head. She didn't have her glasses on or her teeth in, and she was not wearing her own clothes, but a standard-issue NHS nightgown. It was as if all the things that made her Granny had been taken from her, and now she was just a shell. Ben felt so sad to see her like this, but tried to hide it. He didn't want to upset her. "Hello, dears," she said. Her voice was croaky, and her speech a little slurred. Ben had to take a deep breath to stop from bursting into tears. "How are you feeling, Mum?" asked Ben's dad. "Not too clever," she replied. "I had a fall." "A fall?" said Ben. "Yes. I don't remember much about it. One moment I was reaching in the larder for a tin of cabbage soup. The next thing I knew, I was lying on the lino staring up at the ceiling. My cousin Edna called me a couple of times from her nursing home. When she couldn't get an answer, she called an ambulance." "When did you fall over, Granny?" asked Ben. "Let me think. I was lying on the kitchen floor for 2 days, so it must have been Wednesday morning. I couldn't get up to reach the telephone." "I'm so sorry, Mum," said Dad quietly. Ben had never seen his father look so upset. "It's funny because I meant to call you on Wednesday, just for a chat to see how you are," said Mum, lying. She'd never called the old lady in her life, and if Granny ever called the house, Mum couldn't get off the phone quick enough. "You weren't to know, my dear," said Granny. "They did all kinds of tests this morning to see what's wrong with me, X-rays and scans and the like. I'll get the results tomorrow. Hopefully I won't be here too long." "I hope so too," said Ben. There was an uncomfortable silence. No one quite knew what to say or do. Mum hesitantly nudged Dad and mimed looking at her watch. Ben knew hospitals made her feel uncomfortable. When he'd had his appendix out 2 years before, she'd only visited him a couple of times, and even then it had made her sweat and fidget. "Well, we'd better be off," said Dad. Yes, you go," said Granny with lightness in her voice, but sadness in her eyes. "Don't you worry about me. I'll be fine." "Can't we stay a bit longer?" piped up Ben. Mum shot him an anguished look, which Dad clocked. "No, come along, Ben. Your Granny will need to go to sleep in a few hours," said Dad, as he stood up and readied himself to leave. "I'm quite busy, Mum, but I'll try and pop in over the weekend." He patted his mother on the head, like one might a dog. It was an awkward gesture. Dad wasn't a hugger. He turned to go. Mum smiled weakly, and then pulled a reluctant Ben across the ward by his wrist. Up in his bedroom later that evening, Ben determinedly sorted out all the information he'd gathered from school that week. "We'll show them, Granny," he thought fiercely. "I'm going to do it for you." Now Granny was ill, he was more determined to do it than ever. He had until tea time to plan the greatest jewel theft in history. Chapter 19. A small explosive device. The next morning, his mum and dad went through song after song to select some music for their son's upcoming dance competition. Ben sneaked out of the house and cycled to the hospital. When he finally found Granny's ward, he saw that there was a bespectacled doctor perched on her bed. Nevertheless, he raced over excitedly to see the old lady so he could share the plan with her. The doctor was holding Granny's hand and talking to her slowly and quietly. "Just give us a moment alone, please, Ben," said Granny. "The doctor and I are just talking about, lady things." "Oh, okay," said Ben. He sloped back to the swing doors and leafed through a sickly-looking copy of Take a Break. The doctor passed him and said, "I'm sorry," before leaving the ward. "Sorry?" thought Ben. "Why is he sorry?" And he walked tentatively over to his Granny's bed. Granny was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, and when she saw Ben approach, she stopped and shoved it back up the sleeve of her nightdress. "Are you okay, Granny?" he asked softly. "Yes, I'm fine. I just have something in my eye." "Then why did the doctor say 'I'm sorry' to me?" Granny looked flustered for a moment. Well, I imagine he was sorry that he wasted your time in coming in here. There's absolutely nothing wrong with me, as it turns out." "Really?" "Yes, the doctor gave me the test results. I'm as fit as a butcher's dog." Ben hadn't heard that expression before, but he imagined it must mean very, very fit. "That's brilliant news, Granny," exclaimed Ben. "Now, I know you said no before." "Is this what I think it is, Ben?" asked Granny. Ben nodded. "I said no 100 times." "Yes, but what, young man?" "I found a weakness in the Tower of London, and I've spent all week working on a plan of how we can steal the jewels. I think we can really do it." To his surprise, Granny looked intrigued. "Pull the curtains and keep your voice down," hissed the old lady, flicking the switch on her hearing aid to full power. Ben quickly pulled the curtains around Granny's bed and then sat down next to her. "So, at the stroke of midnight, we swim across the Thames in scuba diving gear and locate the ancient sewage pipe. Here," whispered Ben, showing her the detailed diagram in the back of the issue of Plumbing Weekly. "We have to swim up a sewage pipe? At my age?" said Granny. "Don't be daft, boy." "Shush, keep your voice down," said Ben. "Sorry," whispered Granny. "And it's not daft, it's brilliant. The pipe is just wide enough. Look here." Granny lifted herself up from the pillows and moved closer to the page in Plumbing Weekly. She studied the diagram. It did indeed look wide enough. "Now, if we swim up the pipe, we can get inside the tower undetected," continued Ben. "Everywhere else around the perimeter of the building there are armed guards and security cameras and laser sensors. Take any other route in, and we wouldn't stand a chance." Yes. "But then how the blazes do we get into the jewel house where the jewels are kept?" she whispered. "The sewage pipe ends up here in the privy." "I beg your pardon?" "The privy is an old word for toilet." "Oh, yes, so it is." "From the privy is a short run, a short walk across the courtyard to Jewel House. At night, the door to the house is, of course, locked and double locked. Probably triple locked." Granny didn't seem that convinced. Well, Ben would just have to convince her. "The door is solid steel, so we'd drill out the locks to open it." "But the crowns and the sceptres and all that gubbins must surely be kept behind bulletproof glass, Ben," said Granny. "Yes, but the glass isn't bomb-proof. We'll set up a small explosive device to shatter the glass." "An explosive device?" spluttered Granny. "Where on earth are we going to get that from?" "I swiped a few chemicals from science class," replied Ben with a smirk. "I'm pretty sure I can create an explosion big enough to get through the glass." "But the guards will hear the explosion, Ben." No. I'm sorry, that's never going to work," exclaimed Granny as quietly as she could. "Well, I thought of that," said Ben, momentarily delighted with his own ingenuity. "You need to board a train to London earlier that day, posing as a sweet old lady." "I am a sweet old lady," protested Granny. "You know what I mean," continued Ben with a smile. "From the station, you take the number 78 bus all the way to the Tower of London. Then you give the Beefeater guards chocolate cake with something in it to make them sleep." "Oh, I could use my special herbal sleeping tonic," said Granny. Yes. Fantastic," said Ben. "So the guards eat the chocolate cake, and by night time they will be fast asleep." "Chocolate cake?" protested Granny. "Surely the guards would prefer some of my delicious homemade cabbage cake." Ben squirmed. He didn't want to upset Granny, but there was no way anyone would eat a piece of Granny's cabbage cake unless they were intimately related to her, and even then they would probably spit it out when she wasn't looking. "I think a chocolate cake from the supermarket would be better." "Well, you seem to have thought of everything. I'm very impressed, you know. The idea of using that old pipe is genius." Ben flushed with pride. Thanks. But how did you know about it? They don't teach you that stuff at school, do they? About sewage pipes and that? No, said Ben. It's just, I've always loved plumbing. I remember the old pipes being in my favourite magazine. He held up Plumbing Weekly. It's my dream to be a plumber one day. He looked down, expecting Granny to tell him off or mock him. Why are you looking at the ground? Asked Granny. Well, I know it's silly and boring to want to be a plumber. I know you should want to do something more interesting. Ben felt his face turn burning red. Granny put a hand on his chin and gently tilted his head up. Nothing you did could ever be silly or boring, Ben, she said. If you want to be a plumber and it's your dream, then no one can take that away from you. Do you understand? All you can do in this life is follow your dreams. Otherwise you're just wasting your time. I guess. I should hope so. Honestly, you say that plumbing is boring, but here you are planning to steal the crown jewels, for goodness sake, and it's all down to plumbing. Ben smiled. Maybe Granny was right. But I have a question for you, Ben. Yes? How do we escape? A plan like this is no good if you're going to get caught red-handed, my lad. I know that, Granny, so I thought we should go out the way we came in, through the sewage pipe, and swim back across the Thames. It's only 50 metres wide, and I've got my 100-metre swimming badge. It'll be a doddle. Granny bit her lip. She obviously wasn't sure that any of this would be a doddle, not least swimming across a fast-flowing river at night. Ben looked at her with hope in his eyes. Well, Granny, are you in? Are you still a gangster? She looked deep in thought for quite a while. Please, pleaded Ben. I've loved hearing all about your adventures, and I really want to go on a heist with you. And this would be the ultimate, stealing the crown jewels. You said yourself it was every great thief's dream. Well, Granny, are you in? Granny looked at her grandson's glowing face. After a while she murmured, yes. Ben leaped from his chair and hugged her. Brilliant! Granny lifted her weak arms and embraced him. It was the first time in years she had really hugged him. But I have one condition, said the old lady with a deadly serious look in her eyes. What? Whispered Ben. We put them back the next night.